The fog lay heavy over the old mountain road as Evan slowed his motorbike near the wooden bridge. The faint creaking of the planks echoed through the silent gorge. Nova hopped down from the small seat behind him, but then she froze without taking another step. Her tiny paws pressed into the dirt, her body trembling as she stared at the bridge with wide, alert eyes. Evan called her softly, but she refused to move. She kept staring at the shadows beneath the bridge as if something waited there in the cold darkness. Evan walked closer, expecting Nova to follow, but she only whimpered and tucked back with fearful determination. Her tail lowered, her ears flattened, and every part of her small body signaled that something was wrong. Evan felt uneasy as the wind brushed against the fragile ropes. He knelt beside her and tried to comfort her with a gentle scratch behind the ear. She leaned into his touch for a moment, but immediately returned her gaze toward the wooden planks. Evan listened carefully, unsure of what she sensed in the thick curtain of fog. At first, there was only silence. Then a faint tapping sound reached him, so soft and fragile that he thought it might be the shifting wood. He held his breath and waited. The tapping returned, slow and uneven, echoing from somewhere below the bridge. Evan moved closer to the edge, gripping the railing as he leaned over. The gorge beneath him disappeared into swirling white fog, but the sound continued, steady and deliberate. Nova whined again, pacing anxiously as if urging him to understand that someone needed help. He pushed aside a loose plank and looked down through the narrow gap. His breath caught in his throat when he saw a small figure clinging to a lower support beam. A young girl hung there with trembling fingers, her legs dangling above the dark drop below. Her head rested weakly against the beam, and her hands appeared scraped and raw. She managed to tap the wood again with the last of her strength, trying to signal for help. Evan felt a sharp ache in his chest as he realized how long she had fought to stay alive. Nova barked sharply, her voice trembling with urgency. Evan knew there was no time to waste. He dropped his backpack on the ground and searched through it with shaking hands. He pulled out a rope, secured one end to a bolt nearby, and wrapped the other around his waist. The wind grew stronger as he stepped onto that first plank. The wood groaned under his weight, threatening to collapse with every movement. Nova paced along the edge, her anxious whines filling the air as Evan began his slow descent down the side of the bridge. The fog thickened as he climbed lower, making the distance difficult to judge. The girl's faint voice reached him, barely more than a whisper, carried by the cold air. She murmured something that sounded like a plea, and Evan's heart tightened painfully. He reached the beam where she clung with the last of her strength. Her small body shivered violently, and her lips were blue from the freezing temperature. Evan pressed himself against the structure, gripping the rope with one hand while extending the other toward her. She looked up at him with exhausted eyes that seemed ready to close forever. Evan spoke to her gently, trying to keep her awake as he shifted closer. Her fingers slipped from the beam, and she gasped in fear as her body lurched downward. Evan caught her just in time, pulling her against his chest with a firm grip. She felt weightless and fragile, like a child who had been fighting too long. He wrapped his arm around her securely and began the difficult climb back toward the top. Nova barked repeatedly, guiding him with her voice as the wind pushed against him. Evan's muscles trembled from the effort, and every step upward felt like lifting the world. The girl rested her head on his shoulder, drifting in and out of consciousness. Evan forced himself to keep going, pushing through the pain in his arms and the burning in his lungs. Nova's frantic barks became his anchor, pulling him through the fog toward safety. With a final effort, he reached the top of the bridge and dragged himself onto solid ground. Nova rushed to them immediately, pressing her little nose against the girl's cold cheek. She whimpered softly, offering her warmth as Evan wrapped his jacket tightly around the child. The girl opened her eyes slightly and whispered with trembling breath, thanking him for not leaving her. Evan looked at Nova with deep gratitude. He realized that her refusal to cross the bridge had saved a life that would have been lost in silence. She curled beside the girl, refusing to move until she felt the child breathe steady once again. Evan lifted the girl gently into his arms and carried her away from the weakening bridge. Nova walked beside him, matching every step with quiet determination. The girl's cold fingers clung to Evan's shirt as if she feared letting go would send her back into the darkness below. Evan whispered encouragement, hoping his voice would keep her awake. He found a patch of flat ground sheltered by tall pines and carefully set her down. Nova circled the girl anxiously, pressing her warm body against the child's side. Evan removed his scarf and wrapped it around her neck, then rubbed her hands to restore circulation. The girl's breathing remained shallow, but she no longer trembled as violently. Evan spoke softly, asking her name and how long she had been trapped beneath the bridge. Her voice came out weak and strained, barely carrying beyond her lips. She explained that she had been hiking with her older brother when part of the bridge collapsed beneath her feet. She slipped through the gap and landed on the beam, too frightened and injured to climb back up. Her brother had run for help, but he never returned. She had waited for hours, perhaps an entire day, tapping the wood whenever she heard distant footsteps. Evan felt a heavy ache inside his chest as he realized how close she had come to losing her strength entirely. Nova placed her small paw on the girl's arm, offering comfort in her own way. The child managed a faint smile, and Evan felt a surge of relief at the tiny expression of hope. He knew they needed to get her to safety before the cold drained the rest of her strength. Evan gathered his belongings, secured the girl carefully against his chest, and prepared for the difficult walk back to the main path where help might be found. Nova trotted ahead, clearing the way and glancing back every few seconds to ensure they were still following her. The fog began to lift slowly, revealing the forest around them in soft shades of grey and silver. Evan's steps were steady, but each one carried the weight of urgency. The girl leaned against him, whispering that she thought she would never be found. Evan reassured her with quiet words, telling her she had held on with incredible courage. Nova barked lightly, as if agreeing with him. The girl's hand reached out to touch Nova's head, and the puppy leaned into her touch with gentle affection. Evan felt the warmth of that moment settle into his heart, reminding him why he never questioned Nova's instincts. When they finally reached the main trail, Evan heard distant voices calling out through the trees. He responded loudly, guiding them toward his location. A team of rescuers emerged from the forest, rushing toward the girl with a mixture of shock and relief on their faces. They took her from Evan's arms and wrapped her in blankets while thanking him repeatedly for saving her life. Evan shook his head and pointed toward Nova, who stood proudly beside him. The rescuers knelt to pet her, realizing she had been the one who sensed the girl's presence. Nova lifted her chin slightly, as if understanding her role in the rescue. As the rescuers carried the girl away, she reached out and touched Nova's paw one more time. The puppy watched her leave with calm eyes, knowing she had done something important. Evan placed his hand gently on Nova's back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the small life that had changed his own in countless ways. The forest grew quiet again as the rescue team disappeared into the distance. Evan knelt beside Nova and whispered that she had done something extraordinary. Nova wagged her tail softly, leaning into him with quiet affection that warmed the cold air around them. Evan stood up and looked at the bridge one last time. He knew that if Nova had crossed without hesitation, the girl would have remained hidden in the fog, tapping the wood with failing hope until her strength ran out. Nova's refusal was not fear. It was instinct. It was protection. It was a silent call to save a life. He lifted Nova gently into her seat on the bike, fastening the small straps as she looked at him with bright, trusting eyes. Evan started the engine and glanced at the forest path ahead. The journey would continue, but the memory of that day would remain with him forever. As they rode away, Nova rested her tiny head against his back, her breathing soft and steady. Evan felt the warmth of her presence and understood once again that she was not just following him. She was guiding him. She was reminding him that every moment of their journey held a purpose. The wind brushed past them as they left the bridge behind, carrying the quiet truth that had grown between them. She thought he rescued her, but more than once, he realized she was the one rescuing him.